This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Hey guys, Rob McNealy here, and today we have a really fun, big interview. Normally I only have one guest on, but today we have three, and it is a collective group from both PAC Global and Summit Blockchain. So I'd like to introduce, Robin, and then we can go around and then maybe everybody introduce yourselves and how you kind of got here. Does that work for you guys?
Yes, awesome.
Yeah.
Robin, tell us about you. What's going on today?
First and foremost, Feliz Cinco de Mayo a todos. It's Cinco de Mayo today. It's a very important holiday. I am Robin Matthes. I'm the Chief Philanthropy Officer / Head of Charity at PAC Global. And I'm also the Master Coordinator for the Washington Elite AI and Blockchain Summits. In the past, I have mainly attended to Venezuelan refugees by airdropping PAC coins to them so they could then use it to buy essential goods and medicines at street merchants whom we've provided with tablets. And we're partnered with the Liberland Aid Foundation, as well as the Flame of Peace, which is a charitable organization that is active in over 70 different countries. They are run by the House of Habsburg, which is the royal family of Austria. And together with them and Summit Blockchain and many other partners like Goxteen and Give Nation, we are forming the Trees for Peace Alliance. And growing edible food forests, like the one you can see on my background, which is a video that got sent to me by Roland van Reenen, who will introduce himself shortly, is considered by us as one of the most optimal ways to do charity. We'll be restoring nature, we'll be providing food for those who need it most, and in the process we're also looking to improve the existing way that they do agriculture.
Wonderful. Tim, give us a little bit about your background. How'd you get involved with these guys?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So my name is Tim Matthes, and I am the chairman and CEO of a company called Summit Blockchain. We were founded back in July of 2018. I'm here in California, Southern California. And basically what we do at Summit is we invest exclusively into energy efficient blockchain networks. So we've been an investor for I would say almost 2 years now in PAC Global, and we have a few other different holdings. And we are typically an activist investor. I'm on the board of directors of PAC Global, and I've been working with Robin, who's the PAC Global head of charity, as he mentioned, and I would call him our farmer deluxe, Roland van Reenen, on a real interesting opportunity that is charity driven, but also some other areas of growth potential that we see as an investor in PAC Global. So that, I guess, is kind of the short version of us. We're excited about the prospects of blockchain, and in particular, really interesting use cases that can give back to a given community as well. So that's really what got myself and my company excited in this project.
Well, very cool. And Roland van Reenen, how are you today, sir?
I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me for this interview. And I'm Roland van Reenen, as you know already, and I'm working since 2015 on permaculture and regenerative agricultural projects here in Curaçao. I started by my own with zero budget, succeeded to get a food forest on the ground in 3 years, and was asked by the Minister of Agriculture to do more of that stuff. So, and I organized a course with 2 Brazilians who are specialized in the syntropic agroforestry system that we're about to display. And that was a very successful course with 42 participants, and we succeeded to get an agroforestry system here in Curaçao. That's the basis of how we work and how we continue to work from. Yeah.
So quickly, Robin, you're in Curacao,
Yes.
And me too.
and then Roland's in Curacao with you as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Same
then-
streets as well.
And then Tim is in Orange County, Southern California.
Yep, not quite an island over here, but I guess they're part of the Dutch contingent on Curacao.
Well, as I mentioned to Robin before, I've actually been to Curacao twice scuba diving.
Wow.
So I've actually spent a little bit of time in Williamstad, and it was on the northwest coast, a little further north of Williamstad on the coast at the old Habitat Dive Resort is where I used to go.
Yes.
So I like Curacao. That's
most American people are most familiar with Aruba, which is right next to it and has pretty much the same jurisdiction.
Right. That's like where you land and then you fly over to Curacao.
Well, no, you actually get a direct flight to Curacao from Miami.
Yeah.
Well, when I went last time, they didn't have a direct flight, but that was some time ago. So let's just jump into this. I'm kind of a fan of agriculture. In fact, I just am finishing my irrigation system. I actually have I have like a suburban farm. We have a half-acre lot that we live on, and we live in the city. Our garden patch is about 6,000 square feet now, and we have 20 fruit trees, and we have irrigation water rights here in the city. So I'm literally just put in a brand new pump system. We have 1,000-gallon cistern for watering because we flood irrigate our backyard. So our neighbors are, we kind of hide our garden because, our neighbors want it to look really nice in a certain way.
That's awesome.
But it's interesting because most people don't like that, right? Like farms usually look like farms. They don't look like, upper scale kind of like suburban neighborhoods. So we got everything fenced off and hidden. And then we rejuvenated we had a bunch of standard pear trees when we moved in that were 40 feet high and unproductive. We rejuvenated them, and now they're 7 feet high and they're growing back out and productive. And we're building our soil because we have really basic soils here. And they're basically basic clay is what we have. So we've been spending some time over the last couple of years trying to build our soil and fix our soil. So I'm really into mini agriculture. I got 200 plants under lights we're going to be planting next week. So I love organic farming the best I can here in my little patch. So I'm actually excited to talk to you guys about what you're doing. So, let's get into this a little bit. You guys have talked a lot about in the past, this concept of food forests. And what does that mean? What is a food forest? And what do you think you're going to do with food forests? Anybody just jump in, and we can just talk. So,
shall I answer this question, Robin?
Yes, go right ahead.
A food forest is growing food, but imitating the laws of nature, the intelligence of nature, the inherent intelligence of nature. So nature does it. It doesn't work. It does it. It's just, and in a way we try to imitate those processes so that those things work holistically together. And we don't have to put in that much energy. So it's an energy low way of producing food, because the more mature the food forest grow, the less energy you have to put in, the more self-sustaining it will become. And then you got this syntropic agroforestry food forest, and these are very much higher developed, efficiently developed than the normal food forest I was talking about. This is a way of planting a forest with food, but in succession. So you plant from 3 weeks till 20 years, and you produce in the meantime you produce food while the forest is growing. You're always harvesting. And that has also to do with knowing the place and needs of every plant in the system. And the Brazilians, especially a gentleman called Ernst Gotts, developed this system. And the system proved to be very efficient and successful in compared to traditional food forests we know. So that's something very interesting. And of course, it's all about building soil also, but the forest will build the soil and we plant certain trees and plants because of the building of the soil. So we build biomass trees and biomass plants. For instance, if you see the face of Robin, you see behind them the rows of trees, but there are vegetables in between, and also lines of grass. And the grass has also function as biomass provider, and also to do some irrigation and some water storage in the soil. Yeah, you see a line of grass here again.
So would you say that the planting of grass is designed to help with pests and weeds as well?
The way this plant, yeah, according to the Brazilians, it's very interesting. They say if every strata, and strata is a level, how you say it, Robin?
A layer?
A layer in the forest. If every layer is occupied in the forest, then pests won't be a real problem. Of course, there will be pests, but they won't lead the system. They'll be there, but they'll be controlled by other elements in the system. So, but as soon as one of those layers are not present in the system, then they say, then you will have mosquitoes, you will have rats, you will have other plagues, you will have pests there in the system. So that's very interesting perspective. It means that if you plan it good enough, if you plan all those strata, and all due to their needs for sunlight, we have to know those needs, then we can have a relatively pest-free production.
So I'm a big believer in agriculture, as I already mentioned. So you don't have to sell me on it, but how would you sell this to other people? Why do we need this new concept of agroforestry? What is the purpose? Why is this a problem? I guess the question is, what problem are you trying to solve with this?
Now the harvest per square meter is much higher than normal agriculture. That's a fact, because normally if you plant a monoculture, you will have to wait a couple of months to do the harvest. In the meantime, you're putting in energy in it. You're putting fertilizers. You have to plow before and you're waiting. Some labor you have to put in. But in this system of food forestry, you plant everything at the same time. And that means that you start harvesting after 3 weeks while you're waiting for your original crop. And that could be the fruit trees. Normally, if you plant fruit trees, you have to wait for a couple of years for them to produce. You know about that. Mm-hmm. But we plant the vegetables in between, knowing the succession of those different kind of plants. And we start harvesting from 3 weeks, then 6 weeks, we got the next harvest on the same spot. Then we got another harvest at 8 weeks. We get another harvest at 2 months. We got a harvest at a couple of months of, for instance, eggplants. We get then cassava coming in 9 months, and then we got papaya and bananas that will produce for 2-3 years. And then the fruit trees are ready. So it is a continuous harvesting in the process of, and without plowing and putting the energy in that the other normal agriculture has to put in. So that means no plowing anymore. You do the plowing only once, and you make raised beds, and then it's over. And you don't have to put in too much fertilizers, because you produce fertilizers by the plants you plant in the system. So we use mostly green manure in due time. In the beginning, we start, of course, with manure, also cow manure and those kind of manures, organic manures. But then, as the system develops, more nutrients will be added by plants that we planted on that for that purpose, to feed the system. We say food for the food, and that's plant in the system too. So those lines of biomass grasses, for instance, is also used to mow the grass and put the grass back as mulch on the soil, to cover the soil always. And
very good. So you're going to build these out, and what do you hope to do with this high density, more efficient kind of method of farming?
It's not only the food production. The food production, of course, the first interest. We want to make money with food production, and we want to provide food, and also for the farmers. But the nice thing is that if you grow a forest, then all other things you struggle with, for instance, water cycles will be repaired. And especially here on the island, that's our major challenge, because we don't have that much rainfall. We are completely deforested, so that means that the rain is reduced to an absolute minimum, and there's always a strong wind blowing, so the water will evaporate in 4 times the rainfall. And So by setting up a forest, you counter those problems. Not only you're producing food, but you're building the soil, so the erosion will be stopped, and you counter the wind, the influence of the wind, because different strata. If the wind come into a system and it meets different strata, it means it will be neutralized, and water can stay in the system. It will evaporate but condensate after, so it will fall down in the system. So these are just a few examples of what you by producing food that you can tackle also. So you solve a lot of problems while producing food, ecological problems, and at the same time reforestate the island. So bring back the rain also. Just to mention a few things.
Well, it's a good thing. So, Tim, you guys are, working on some pilots that are coming up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and maybe just let me add too, and kind of, I'm almost anything but a farmer. I guess, my experience, I used to cut my parents' yard as a kid, and by the way, those are some chores no kids seem to do now, but I digress a bit. But
mine do.
Yeah, but so this Rob is what really excited me about this project here. So, I first met Roland through Robin, and we did one of these, a Zoom call, and I started hearing about it, and I kind of went back to my office here and did some homework and looked up some things, and sort of the beauty, I think, of this syntropic agroforestry and regenerative forestry, I think, is, it's not something man-made, and it's not something that just happened, a few weeks ago or a few months ago. One could argue this has been around for, let's say, thousands of years, and probably the best example of it is the lush organic Brazilian rainforest. And what you see there are complementary plants, working in syntropy, meaning together, versus entropy, where be it plants or humans or whatever are working the opposite of not together. And as a result, you have one plant next to another plant, which essentially confuses an insect, so it keeps the bugs away. You don't need to spend money on insecticide. As Roland mentioned, there's a lot of pruning that goes on, so you get the green matter from the trees coming down. And soil degradation, I think, is one of the biggest problems that, we face worldwide, the bad quality of soil. And through the pruning, you're basically, if you take a step back, you have a self-sustaining ecosystem that really, over time, doesn't require fertilizer, doesn't require pesticides, starts requiring less and less water. And don't take our word for it. This has already been out there. It's been perfected, as Roland mentioned, by, I think, he's sort of known as the godfather, Ernst Goetsch. And you see what he did in Brazil starting back in the 80s, basically took a deforested timber farm that had no good soil quality. And now he's, I think, producing 3 to 4 times the yield of a monoculture or single crop farm. So I think it's very exciting, and it's a very timely subject, especially in kind of what the world's going through now. And you never thought food sustainability, even in the US, would be on the front of anybody's mind, but you're seeing food lines and things like that. And so, some of our pilots that we're doing, we're sort of taking into account of what's going on in the world today. And really our first pilot, I call it kind of our pre-pilot, is going to be done in a property that Robin lives on, which is a home, a plot of land at his home. So what we hope to accomplish out of that is basically a homegrown edible food forest where somebody can be, I'm not sure, 100% self-sufficient. He's not going to be growing any beef on his yard there, I don't think, but at
maybe
least
a goat. You can get a goat, right?
I could probably get a goat.
Get a goat.
Yeah, so he might do
or some
that.
chickens.
Yeah, so
and
that
some chickens.
exactly, some of those things. So I think, again, it's really exciting. We have these pilot programs. The first one really starting at Robin's place. We're going to have, I think, 3 more in Curacao. We were going to just really do one main one in Curacao, but with the unknown travel restrictions, how long those are going to go for, we're going to do a total of 4 pilot programs in Curacao. The second one is going to be, and by the way, outside of Robin, the other 3 pilot programs are land that is either owned by Roland or through associates of his that are going to provide that land for us. So we're excited about that. We have our farmer on board who you know, has his skill set that none of us have outside of maybe you, Rob, on this discussion here. But starting out in Curacao, we think we're going to be able to show an improved soil quality over time. I think we're going to be able to show a significant, hopefully, yield increase versus a monoculture farm that we have some data points on and that we're looking at. And then being able to really monitor, verify, and report those results on the blockchain, which is where I get pretty excited, knowing and you know, my enthusiasm for blockchain. So I believe we're going to be one of the first companies I've been able to identify to kind of marry again edible food forest and the potential of those with the ability to really see how we're progressing on the blockchain. So and then from there, you know, we have a plan for Kenya, 5 acres, and then Jamaica, 50 acres, and then hopefully from there we think we can scale it to other parts of some developing countries. So, you know, it's exciting, and you know, probably like you, Rob, I see a lot of projects, and this one really got my interest from you know, all the different parts of it that can be used to help people, but also show I think a better way to set up farms going forward.
So how do you plan to incorporate blockchain into this project? What's the actual use case of the technology?
So it's pretty interesting. It's mostly for submitting KPI data and also MVR data around the projects that we are doing. We're basically initially looking to leverage the IPFS blockchain for submitting data around the pilots. And then we'll use our experience that we've gained through the pilots to build our own data blockchain for the purpose. And regarding the key performance indicators, like we have to submit the data on one side so the farmers can input their metrics that are using this concept around the sub-indicators for the projects. And then we submit the data onto the blockchain. And on the other side, there will be a sort of a website that will have a dashboard that is displaying the data. In the case of IPFS, it's a .EAT or a .xyz or a .looks domain. And upon the input of the data by the farmers, for example, an American farmer would input that they're working on 2.5 acres of land, for example. The app could convert this figure into 1 acre, which is the standard used for the entire database. So that would allow us to actually standardize databases from across the world. And we will be mostly focusing on user friendliness when we build such an app, and also focusing on workshops between, well, farmers, technicians, and children. And then there's the monitor, verify, and report side of it, which would essentially allow us through IoT pins to monitor the tree. So for instance, when one of them dies or gets cut down, an alarm will sound and the park ranger could go check it out, if you will. And the IoT sensors measure the suction of the trees, and then they verify that the tree is alive. And in doing so, we can actually monitor and verify in quasi real time on the blockchain, and report to relevant instances like the UN, for example, or the Billion Trees Initiative.
So are people going to want to watch the grass grow on blockchain real time?
It depends on which people, because the UN has publicly acknowledged that it is seeking to leverage blockchain to achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, by 2030. And we are using the metadata and the methodological approach from the cultural organization. And they have different sub-indicators. Well, I should go back a few steps. In short, we're basically following the United Nations structure that has been laid out by the Food and Agricultural Organization. We are focusing on the environmental dimension of sustainable development. You also have the social dimension and the economical dimension. So we've narrowed it down to SDG number 2, which is zero hunger. And it has a couple of targets, and we chose target 2.4 and the SDG KPI 2.4.1. You could Google this. I will also make this data publicly available, but bear with me for a second. And the FAO will also, like the Food and Agricultural Organization, will also help us with measurements on larger projects after our pilot of 500 acres and above. But let me share my screen for a quick second. Do you know where I hear? Share my screen. So here you see the SDG indicator 2.4.1 and the different sub-indicators. So you see here in the environmental dimension that you have the prevalence of soil degradation. So we would use soil tests that we would mail over to institutions that could do some research on the soil and send us back the soil test, and we could implement that on the blockchain. And then you have the variation in water, and Roland was telling me that instead of you measuring like metric meters or metric tons of water that you're using, you measure how often a week you would feed the plants water. And then there's other ones like the use of fertilizers and the use of pesticides, and also the use of biodiverse supportive practices, because we're planning on planting over 100 different trees, different plants per acre, and like about 12 to 1300 different trees in total per acre. So we'll be performing quite well in these areas. The UN has essentially uses a traffic light approach where they measure the percentages of these sub-indicators, and then we have here what we projected that ours will look like we'll use less water. You can see here the water use and all the, so this data we will measure and implement into the blockchain. And ultimately we're also looking to, well, we're looking to appeal to the instances like the UN or the Billion Trees Initiative, with whom we're in contact through with one of our directors called As Sultan. And the ultimate goal is for them to either acknowledge us as a partner, which is very possible because you only have to fill in a form, with which I'm very well on my way. And then for them to ultimately use our PAC Global data blockchain to achieve some, if not all, of the SDGs that are written in the 2030 agenda.
Wow, that's sounds complicated, but it's interesting to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of things where blockchain could actually solve a lot of the things that we're seeing. Like you can standardize the projects by the thing I was mentioning earlier about the metric submission, but also you have, for example, this is just an example, carbon databases. The UN has different carbon databases right now that are all like they have local metrics for the countries where they have their carbon database. So a carbon credits project could actually submit data to different databases, and then you have double counting of carbon credits. For the record, a carbon credit is 1 metric ton of carbon processed by, for example, trees, but it could also be alternative energy. It could be all kinds of different things. So all in all, we are looking to use the pilots to start leveraging blockchain. I'm kind of seeing how I stop sharing and put back on my video. And leveraging the blockchain for the SDGs and a lot of other social good projects out there. Because we know that on a lot of different levels, there can be improvements by using the blockchain for such a means, for such an end.
So a couple quick, just little questions. Will this work in any environment? Like, for instance, will this regreen the deserts? Because that's been something that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Because by the way, if you want to regreen the desert, there's a lot of cheap desert land in Utah that you can get for like pennies an acre. So if you want to do a project that's regreening the desert, Just come on out to Utah. They'll give you the land.
So I think Roland could answer that.
My answer would be yes. Yeah. I'm trying at the moment. I'm trying out the project without irrigation, so that will be can be used in a desert situation. It's also a technique that is developed in Brazil with less or more or less the same rainfall as we get yearly, but 7 months of no rainfall at all. And that means that, and without irrigation, that means that you have to build up very gradually a system that holds the water for you. And what they use in this case, they use a kind of cactus. It's the nopal cactus from Mexico, and they plant them very densely and together with agave. And that will build up the water levels in the soil, in the plants in the first stage. And these plants will be used as mulch, like in the normal agroforestry system, and will slowly drip in the water in the soil. So you can then, in the next phase, you can start planting vegetables and fruit trees that will be fed with the water that the cactus have been stored. So that's a case scenario without irrigation. But if you can use irrigation, you can, of course, speed up those processes. So I would say yes, especially in deserts-like situations, it's very useful. It depends only on, we have to search for the right plants that can stand those circumstances. But the system itself, it's very useful in any situation.
Yeah, for example, in Kenya, we're focusing on preventing flooding rather than desertification.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what
and also
would
here in Curacao, you might say we got a desert-like situation. Only the only difference between the normal desert is that we don't have that huge differences in night and day temperatures. But the way the country looks like is the real desert-like situation. So
is there? You said earlier that the land in Curacao has been mostly deforested. Is there a lot of vacant land or unused land now in Curacao that you could start reforesting the country?
Yes, there are certain options. There's a lot of government land, so that is not the first option, although the government is very interested also. But there's also a lot of land of farmers that people that have land, but not necessarily cultivated. So it's very nice to find out if those people are willing to offer their land so that they will have an income and shared income. You know, that the farmer who does the work will get maybe the 50% of the income, on the one who has the land the other half. These kind of constructions are to be developed yet. Yeah.
So what would you say then, and anybody jump in here, what's the business opportunity here? How do you do this sustainably, and how do you fund it sustainably?
The business opportunity, you say?
Yes. How do you fund this sustainably, this project and this concept?
The financial part may be best explained by Tim or Robin.
Yeah.
So from what I've gathered, that once you install a well, once you install the irrigation, the project pretty much becomes self-sustainable, because the harvest could, by the time you'll need irrigation again, it'll be at least 3 years later. And everything else is basically self-sustainable at that point.
Yeah, the only thing you have to do is pruning.
Yeah, and for these initial projects, so we're looking to fund them, and by we, my company, Summit Blockchain, pretty reasonable. You know, our budget, I think we're looking at, you know, under $5,000 per pilot program, and like Roland and Robin mentioned, you know, there's a fair amount of work a decent amount of work, I would say, on the front end, but that definitely ebbs out over time, becomes less.
Yes.
And, you know, there, again, a lot of, I think, really unique opportunities out there to help people with some of their you know, land that they have now, which is, again, been deforested or who knows what, but there's so much unusable land out there. You know, we see it as a real big opportunity. Yes. I will say this, you know, through some of the projects that have been done, not by us, but others in the industry previously, they've been able to show that it actually increases rainfall in that microclimate by having a really lush, organic, sustainable food forest. And it has also increased the rainfall. So pretty crazy, some of these results. But I think, again, on multiple levels, it makes a lot of sense. Once you dig down into it, it sort of I kind of got that, oh yeah, moment, where, this makes sense and it's not, overly complicated. And when you really get your arms around it, which doesn't take a long time, it makes a lot of sense. So again, I think with these initial rollouts, we are looking to capture a lot of data, build a nice template using a lot of the UN's parameters that they've already put together, but just doing it in a little bit different, more efficient way, and that's the blockchain. And then, again, we see a lot of other areas, be it, Central America, South America, where slash and burn seems to be the optimum choice that they're using. And, that's really a short-term solution. And again, it all sort of comes back to soil, I think, as, you get soil runoff if there was a slash and burn program in place. And this is just really a way to do things, I think, smarter. And again, don't trust any of us on the call.
Nope.
Trust nature. Just look at what nature has done. And it's really, the bottom line is it's nature working together to produce the best results possible.
I would like to add one thing. Nature will probably do 100 years to reforest the land. We can do it in 10 years, and that's the human intelligence into the natural intelligence by using the natural intelligence.
Yeah, and I would argue that it's the main source of income would come from our blockchain applications. An example would be once we've proven the concept and done our pilots that we would apply for grants, for example, and that the food that comes out of this, because PAC Global is largely focused on charity, we're not really looking to directly profit from it, but more do it in some sort of a way that it contributes to the humankind and the greater good.
Well, I couldn't get any more kumbaya than that. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. Where can people find out more about the project and say they want to get involved or invest or help out in some way?
You could start by looking at our Twitter, the PAC Global Twitter. Our operations and most of our direct stakeholders are on Discord. And we also have a website called pacglobal.io.
Fantastic, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And folks, we're going to have all those links up on our website associated with this blog and this podcast up at robmcnealy.com. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.